Hey everyone, it's Monday, May 20th, and it's time for Chatting with Agnes and Cecilia, where we discuss topics affecting 501c organizations. Today's guest is Dean West, President and founder of Association Laboratory, Inc., and he's going to be discussing Looking Forward 2019, what's next for 501c groups. This is the 8th edition of the paper, so we're really looking forward to talking with Dean today. Chatting with Agnes and Cecilia is brought to you by Rogue Tulips LLC, a 501c consulting and association management services company. We are also a proud supporter of the 501c League, a virtual membership organization for all 501c professionals. And here we are with our guest, Dean West, and my lovely co-host and friend and colleague, Agnes Amos Coleman. I'm Cecilia Supp, one of our co-hosts. I'm the CEO and founder of Rogue Tulips LLC. And Agnes, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Cecilia, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Agnes Amos Coleman. I'm an author and a consultant with Rogue Tulip, as well as a mentor with the 501c League.
Thank you, Agnes. And Dean, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Dean West, and I'm president and founder of Association Laboratory. We're a research and strategy firm serving the association community and also develop strategic education for association executives.
Great. Welcome, Dean. Thanks for being a guest on the show. Full disclosure, I did work with Association Laboratory for a little over 10 years and occasionally work with them as a strategic counsel. So it's really fun having Dean here as a guest on our show today. So Dean, speaking of that, I found the original 2012 edition of Looking Forward, which originally started as a qualitative study. It's now a major, intensive, quantitative environmental scan. What are the major changes you have seen between 2012 and 2019?
Sure. It was interesting when I did the analysis this year. I did the same thing. I went back to 2012 to see how close, basically what we thought was going to occur did occur. And a couple of things did. One was the globalization aspect. 8 years ago is when associations were particularly interested in global expansion, and we've seen that play out pretty aggressively over the last 8 years, to no one's surprise. And now what our current study really shows are how people are struggling to come up with the combination of value propositions necessary. The second issue that didn't come up 8 years ago was the whole concept of content strategy. The concept of trying to have an impactful holistic education or communication strategy. And you really see over the last 5 years how that has become one of the preeminent efforts through which associations are trying to create non-transactional relationships with their members and extend beyond their members into other stakeholder groups. So for us, and then the third thing is really the continued resilience of things like face-to-face meetings and membership models. There's struggles with those things. They're challenging things to adjust. But many of us remember people talking about the death of membership. Membership is still a foundational and overwhelmingly successful strategy. Many of us remember the death of meetings, particularly after 9/11 and the advent of new technologies like Zoom. We get rid of meetings. Meetings are prospering as both a sales channel for trade associations and educational channel for professional societies. So I think those are three of my kind of big bullet points out of the comparison of those two studies.
That's great. So Agnes, what do you think of that?
You know, it's a fascinating study, and I'm wondering what the future looks like for 501c association as we really look at the emerging world as it is right now with technology and risk issues, particularly the risk issues globally. The association world or the 501c world definitely has a part to play in this process. And I'm wondering how that fits into this, Dean, and whether this is some of the, I see it as a future trend, how 501cs are going to manage the risk factor in their, in the world, in their space. It's a big issue that impacts each and every one of us. So I'm quite interested in seeing how that would play out in the future if they're not already addressing it.
Sure. I think what we see, and this is predominantly from a United States Association perspective, is you're seeing different waves of kind of global activity. The first wave was a realization that technology allowed US-based associations to do things globally much easier, faster, and less expensively than historically they could have. They could reach out to people. There was translations. They could, all these different things. But and so many associations said, let's go global. But what I think the next phase of their development was to understand that global in China, global in France, and global in Brazil are three different things. And global in southeastern China and global in northwestern China are two different things. And so the challenge the associations have now, and this was the number one reason by far by global respondents who were looking forward this year, was how do you take a global strategy and dilute it down to individualized regional, country, or local value propositions so that your Brazilian, your French, and your Chinese value propositions can be very, very different, because associations are seen as different entities in different parts of the world. The terminology association is common, but the roles associations play in different parts of the world is very, very different. I was really quickly, for example, I'm part of the Indian Association Congress Advisory Council. The way the Indian associations look at membership is very, very different than the way U.S. associations look at membership. It's more likely to be a lifetime membership, as an example. When you look at China, membership is much less successful, which is why credentialing strategies, certification, education strategies are more prevalent in terms of success. Europe is not a place, is a combination of very different places. So a German engineering society, a French engineering society, and a Spanish engineering society sound alike, but are very different with their own cultures and their own interests and their own missions. And I think that's been a struggle for associations to figure out how to identify and prioritize and adapt the broader international or global strategy into these individual activities or parts of the world.
That's an interesting point, because everybody talks about going global, but based on what you just said, it's more like going regional, international, as opposed to one global strategy.
Yeah, it's, I'm trying to think about the phase. It's like, how do you localize your global strategy? And the old, kind of thing we used to, think global, act local, or something like that, or vice versa. Was
that's for the environment, though.
So, we have a global strategy as an association. For example, we're a healthcare society, and what we want to do is foster a climate of positive research and positive health outcomes. But how do you do that in France, how you do that in the U.S., how you do it in Brazil, and how you do it in China, and how you do it in Ethiopia are very, very different places. And it's adapting to those different regions, I think, is challenging.
And I think that's also another good point, because what you were saying about what membership means in India does not mean the same thing in Brazil or Europe. I mean, Europe is a lot of different countries on one piece of land. And when you look at the importance of joining groups, China is basically one big group. It's a very homogeneous nation, which is why joining probably isn't as important as it might be in Europe, where it's very much part of the social structure as opposed to just professional. Joining groups is a very big deal in Europe, and I read a really good book called The Scion Revelation about it that gives a lot of insights by Lynn Picknett and her partner Clive, I want to say Owen, I think that's it. But anyways, great book, Scion Revelation, about that, because digging into how these things affect people in Europe and the societal thing, like people in France say they've met everybody they need to meet by the time they get out of university. So when you're a US-based organization trying to reach out like that, I think that's another interesting thing. And then kind of pulling it back to you to the content focus this time, what are some of the things that you have learned? You also did a very successful content strategy seminar last year. What are some of those things from content strategy that can be applied to our international regions that we're trying to serve?
Sure. Well, actually, content strategy as a whole is, again, it comes out of our study this year. We just started testing it this year, actually, is becoming, I think, probably the preeminent new strategy associations are doing. And the reason they're doing that is that there are concerns about the credibility of civil institutions. Associations are concerned about the public and members' perception of their own credibility. They're concerned about delivering useful, relevant information. And content strategy as a whole, generically speaking, has become a mechanism to start addressing that. The problem, so the opportunity for that is, it's extremely scalable. A digital document can be distributed worldwide effectively for nothing. You can distribute through Amazon, you can email it, so that the cost barriers to publishing are effectively zero. Two problems. One is the competitive environment is savage. There's a particularly apropos graph in the study that shows not only the multiple sources of competition, but the rising level of competition. Association CEOs, almost 80% of them are concerned about the competitive content information environment. So how do you differentiate your information from everyone else's? The second big problem people have is they're structured along product lines. So there's an event planning committee, there's a journal publications committee, there's an education committee, where the audiences aren't interested in your internal organizational structure. We've been working on content strategy with a couple of groups, and it's less about defining what they talk about and more about helping them restructure to have a common vision of what content strategy is and how people in different departments and different association product lines can work together more effectively to produce it. And that, again, comes out of the study this year, and it's been a base of quite a bit of our content strategy business, which surprised me. I thought it would be more along the lines of what should we talk about, what information is relevant, things of that nature. But it's really about we can identify what's relevant with a variety of mechanisms, but we're not structured to deliver it in a holistic manner throughout the year. And it's hard to do a thing when your structure is contrary to what you're trying to do.
Right. Well, and what other, we have about 5 minutes left. So, and unfortunately, Agnes has dropped off. So I think she may have lost her internet connection. To kind of keep with our international conversation today, Agnes is coming to us from Nigeria, where she's visiting family. And I'm heading off to Australia later today, actually. And Dean just got back from Greece and is heading to India. So, now, we've talked a lot about international, and one of the questions I've been wondering lately, the international community has been looking to the United States for years for guidance on how to be an association or how to be a 501c. Do you think that's starting to shift now? Do you think that they are becoming better, not better than the U.S., but do you think they are finding their footing? Do you think that they may be taking the lead in the future on the future of 501cs?
I think that a couple of responses. One is there are some substantial non-U.S. For a generic term, nonprofits. Think International Olympic Committee, International Red Cross as an example. We have a client in Geneva, Switzerland, and so there is not a monopoly by the United States on kind of nonprofit activity. Or association activity. But the associations fulfill different roles in different countries. And again, using China as a fairly easy example, the associations are effectively in lockstep with the government. They are not independent entities the way we would think of it as the United States. And so associations will use the same terminology, but the role of the associations in different countries is different. Where I think you're seeing growth on the non-U.S. associations is one is in the professionalization of staff, and two, in the realization that associations can act as effective venues for things like public health and safety, for trading quality control, things of that nature, things that allow companies and professionals to work together more effectively. But they're nascent organizations in terms of how we would consider them in the United States. Another good example of this, when we did a study for the Lions Club International a few years ago, is the perception of membership and the perception of who's in. And so, for example, our perception in the United States is if you want to join, you're allowed. Welcome, write your check and you're in. Where in other parts of the world, it's very much an invite only. It's a private club. So they'll talk about membership, but they mean very, very different things. So I think what we're seeing is a gradual increase in the professionalization of people who run organizations. But what they are doing is adapting an association to those unique needs of their country or their region, and it may or may not look like a United States association, even though much of the terminology will be similar.
So they are, and that's an interesting thing. The conference I'm going to be attending is the World Taxpayers Conference, and so there are taxpayer groups from all around the world. So they're more focused on grassroots advocacy kind of activities, yet they still need some of this, management input. And just seeing like how they're approaching things, I'm really looking forward to doing that, to get another plug. So Dean, we're almost out of time. I want to thank you again for joining us today. Talk about looking forward. Every year it gets better. So how can people find Looking Forward, the 2019 edition?
The easiest way is to go to associationlaboratory.com, and you can click on the banner at the top of that page, and it takes you to our Knowledge Center, where you can purchase it. You can also purchase a whole features discussion packet that includes the full report, a PowerPoint template with the raw data set that you can customize, a link to 3 interpretive videos. That's a curriculum on our interpretation of the data, and a discussion guide and on-site agenda templates and things of that nature, so that you can lead your own discussions about the future. And there's a variety of other resources there as well. And if anybody has questions or would like to talk to me about it, I'm happy to chat with them at any point. There's also a free executive summary for those of you just interested in glancing at it.
Well, it's quite a toolkit that's been put together now, and I think that will help people implement. What's the best way to get in touch with you?
Again, associationlaboratory.com. Our Chicago office phone number is 312-224-2626. That follows me when I travel, like everything now. Or email me at dwest@associationlaboratory.com. Again, all the contact information is on our website. Happy to chat with you.
That's great, and thanks for taking 15 minutes to talk with us. On behalf of myself and Agnes, and I'm sorry Agnes had to drop off today, as Agnes and I say every week, take 15 minutes and talk to somebody. You might learn something. So thanks, Dean. Thanks, everyone, and we will see you next week. Bye, everyone.
Take care, everyone.